What we have there is the three possible areas in the development cycle that a lot of us have to go through. Botswana is where that red star, where the flag is at the moment. We have, whatever we have been reputed for in the past, has been the ability to provide infrastructure, the ability to provide or develop processes and procedures. But we haven't been able to show quality in terms of adaptability to ICT and to the demands in our market today, in the ability to provide fully qualified personnel fitted for the job market today in Botswana. Yesterday at the Western Cape University, the professor asked if we are going to skip all the other cycles, agricultural, industrial, and so forth. There is no choice. You do have to. But the important thing is to learn what society did to respond to any difficulties at any of those phases of development that you went through, so that as you go IT, you do not lose the human factor because you are applying ICT to people, and that remains constant in all of this. Next slide, please. Botswana is heavily dependent on diamonds. All our money, really, a majority of our money, for many years, over 75% of our income has been from revenues. And with the world recession hitting us heavily, our sales have started to drop. We have been talking about diversifying the economy, and we are doing that very intensively. We have other mineral exploits to venture into, but we believe that the biggest area to venture into is the human capital, because we can have as many minerals as we want, but if our people are not trained and set to be employed in that sector, we will continue to have growing numbers of qualified people without employment. The ideal there for us is the blue line that you see, which we hope will help us as the diversification grows. So should the human capital grow to make sure that we match and maintain our level of sustenance from minerals at that red line. Next slide, please. Botswana there, if you look at global competitiveness reports, we are lowest in those three areas: the global competitiveness, knowledge economy index, and doing business in Botswana. Luckily on education, we haven't done as well, but in the region we have stayed within acceptable rates, remaining at 66 out of 144 in the maths and science, and overall at 55 in the 144. Slide. What we have there are policy efforts that Botswana has gone through over the years to try and improve on our knowledge, and also to show that we have been concerned about education, its applicability to the economy at any particular time. That is what we are hoping for. The biggest project we are dealing with is to dual the education system. We are a remnant of the old British Empire, and the school system was all academic. And that all academic runs along the line, like I said, dyslexia. It's on my left, the yellow column. The yellow column where we had primary, secondary, the usual 12 years of grade 1 up to grade 12 if you are in South Africa, or Form 1 to Cambridge if you are in other parts of the Commonwealth. If you did any vocational work, you did that because you failed in the academics, or it happened that you didn't have anywhere else to go, and that's where you went. And very often, government didn't even bother sponsoring you to go there. There is no way we're going to create the necessary level of employment if we don't now open up the gates so that the vocational sector becomes just as critical to education as the academic. And the point that was raised earlier by you, Minister Mkhize, earlier on was that the evaluation of capability has to happen early. We want to do it at primary. We want to make sure that by the time students finish 10 years of education, we know exactly what they're suited for. This, we hope, will be in place in the next 3 to 5 years. And that is, you will get the slides to look at your leisure later on in the day. That, again, just explains the system as it works at the moment from primary. The one just new piece of information there is that pre-primary, we have just introduced an induction program which makes sure that the class of 2013 at grade 1 registers and starts induction in October 2012, so that they have 6 to 8 weeks at least to know how to say good morning, teacher, and to know where they should sit, and to know that you need permission to go to the toilet. The basic things that take so much of early learning time during the academic year, take care of those the year before. Our intention is to do that for a whole 12 months. The reason we had to do it only for 6 to 8 weeks is because of the shortage of facilities. If we had enough classrooms in all the schools, we would do it for a whole 12 months. But because we haven't got enough classrooms, we wait until the last group of Standard 7 out of school leave after their examinations and then enroll the group for the following year and use the same teachers to get them prepared. And as you can see, the percentages in between the boxes are our transition rates from primary or before primary to pre-primary to primary. We have that 5% shortage of what we call absent children, of parents that still believe in taking their children away from school and taking them to cattle posts and such other social commitments. And we are doing a major education exercise to make sure that parents do not continue to do that, to avoid the dropout rate at that early age. But once they're in primary, the transition rate from primary to junior secondary has been at a steady 98%, minimum sometimes 95%. Unfortunately there, with girls, we begin to see early teenage pregnancy. We begin to see dropout in boys, again going to cattle posts. Botswana is a cattle country, more cattle than people on the last count. There were over 3 million cattle and only 2.2 million people. I don't have any cattle, so it's people like my permanent secretary who has the majority of those cattle. And then we move between junior certificate to senior certificate, a transition rate of 63%. There, because there's an examination and a pass. The 37% has been what goes to the brigades, some of it. But we've now decided that open that door to vocational training so that it is not because students have failed. It is because it has been determined as early as just before the examinations that they will go the route of a brigade technical college or do private study long before the ultimate happens. But because I'll go to a later slide where I'll explain to you that this is flowing as normal. Please keep it in the back of your mind that as we do this, there are students to whom this has happened a lot earlier than the initiatives I'm talking about, who are in the homes, unguided for any school or any vocation, and whom we have to bring into the fold. Next slide, please. That is just to show you our budget in comparison, how we allocate between Botswana, Mauritius, and Chile. Again, you can study that. Botswana is in the blue, the deep blue, or the royal blue. And Mauritius is green, and Chile is red. Next slide, please. Now that is what we've just received from our national census, showing that unemployment, because the question in the census questionnaire was, are you employed? And of course, everybody, 15 to 19, if they were in school, of course they were not employed. So the numbers did bulge, we believe, out of reason there, because there is a large number of students there who are in school, all the way up to 24. And of course, the numbers begin to drop at 25, because that's where real employment begins to take place. But in that group, we have had to discount the number of students at school. We have had to also consider a number of young people who have already been to school but don't have a skill, who are now becoming part of this other program we call Skill in the Nation. Next slide, please. Looking at what is happening today, I will use the vertical charts. The red there showing the level of unskilled people in the youth. Our plans in the next 5 years is to deliver that intermediate, because there are many jobs that haven't got people doing them, particularly in the mining sector. Ultimately, we believe, given our population and the level of industrial development that should take place for our citizens, the picture should be a promising one. We should be able to create those jobs by the beginning of the 3rd year from today. But just by way of investment now in education for the sponsors, this will be the interesting part. We have grouped the economy in Botswana into hubs, particularly within government, to help direct and improve the linkages with the private sector as the other part of the economy. We have the Innovation Hub that does mostly with the sciences and ICT, the Diamond Hub, naturally. We have succeeded to have the Diamond Selling Center move out of London to Botswana. So now all diamonds worldwide will be sold in Botswana. We thought it was the biggest achievement, because it didn't make sense that we were the biggest mine by way of cartage weight producing, but still selling outside the country. So it was a major achievement, and we thank our neighbors there, South Africa and Namibia, for supporting that move. It is now in Botswana, and therefore that is a big area for general investment for all subsidiary sections in there. Education, that's big, because we are open now to settle or register a lot of foreign colleges partnering with our colleges in the country. City and guilds have just moved into Botswana because we needed them for standards and for accreditation for our vocational training. A lot of international universities have partnered with us. Harvard is with us on the HIV research. But on top of that, we have what we call a Top Achievers program. Our most brilliant students, we have partnered there with what we call the Ivy League of universities. They go to Cambridge, Oxford, Harvard, and Yale universities, because that's where we believe if we are ever going to claim our place in life as a researcher country, as a center for knowledge, we need to have the educated people and the brain power to do that. Agriculture, yes, we don't do so well because our rains are unpredictable. But we have the delta with water running throughout the year. We need to do things there to make sure that we are self-sufficient in food. We are landlocked, and it is a very dangerous position to be in if you cannot feed yourself. Energy, we're doing fairly well there. We've got the largest amount of coal, already now exporting to Namibia, but we also believe we can turn around and be an energy exporter. So there are subsidiary activities there. Transport, that one is a little tricky because we are dependent on everybody else around us to do that. Now, transport there, I equate that to ICT. These require borderless agreements. They are intrusive industries. There is no way you can do them and contain them within your country, no matter how excellent they are, because if you cannot get to the next country, then they are no good for you by way of trade or by way of communication with your neighbors. I think we're done with the slides. But to just show those hubs in the learning or education sector, the medical or health hub, there are institutions that are coming up. We are building a university teaching hospital to work with this, and also to expand all the research that we're doing around HIV and tropical diseases. Mining, the same thing. We have now a mining school. There's a faculty of mining at the University of Botswana, but we are opening a University of Science and Technology whose main emphasis is going to be mining, environment, and agriculture. Same thing there. With agriculture, we are actually already producing vaccine for foot and mouth in our own laboratories and exporting that, but that needs growth. It's not big enough to sustain not even the sector, but those are things that, and there you just see a sample of what those hubs will do or can do. And then the last one is an invitation to you to invest in Botswana and the reasons why I think you must. The education sector does reasonably well. Government spends 27% of its national budget on education. Of that, 2.2 billion pula is spent in the local market to support students who are sponsored by government in the local industry. And we would rather pay for students that are sponsored by government within the country than send them outside. For a long time, Africa has believed that knowledge existed outside, which maybe was what we believed, but there's also a lot of knowledge within that needs to be explored. And we believe that until we can build confidence in our own capability to educate our own, it doesn't make sense. We will never attract anyone to believe in higher education being of any value to them. And therefore, I would like to indicate here that maybe for us as governments, the minute we realize that ICT in its own hasn't or shouldn't have borders, and also as long as we realize that it changes by the day, by the time I'm through with my presentation, we could be an iPhone 6, 7, 8, I don't know. I'm still stuck on iPad 1 because I bought a 64 gigabyte thing that I haven't filled, and it works just as well. It's a little slow, a little clumsy. But that's where I am at the moment because I believe it's usable. But then, technology also has got a way of being fashionable. The marketing there is excellent. These guys know their job. If you don't have an iPad 3, you are out of date, and therefore, out of date sometimes becomes synonymous with not so smart. And I think that's, it's a marketing stint, I can tell you that. But it works. It works for the industry, and I think that we also should learn to encourage. But there's a phobia. The reason I'm saying this is that amongst us ministers, there is a serious phobia against technology, a very serious one. And until we can convince ministers that it's okay to press a couple of buttons, it's okay to be on Facebook, it's okay to be on the internet, no one will think that there is a politician looking at naked girls. There are other things on the internet. So we need to educate the politician that there are some really serious uses of the internet, of ICT. It's got nothing to do with looking at dirty pictures. And that's a long jump. Some people are actually embarrassed to say, yes, I was on Facebook, and say, you're on Facebook with all those kids using all that language. But you learn, if you can at least for a moment accept that it's like walking through the mall and listening to kids talk. It's a social platform, for goodness sake, and you will hear those things, and those things are real to the children, those children for whom you must create education, whom you must grow the industry. It helps you learn how they think and what they do. And if you must change the way they think, it's better at least to know what they say. But then there's an issue, again, with us politicians, education and the unions. We can do all the ICTing we want to do. We can bring all the equipment that is modern. But for as long as we do not create the social relationships between teachers and students and parents and the politicians to realize that ICT is a tool from which we all can benefit, we can do all of this, and the teachers will walk out on you on an examination day. And much as the students may have learned, much as they may be exemplary in presenting what they have learned, if there's nobody to set the exam or mark it, it's all gone to waste. And therefore, I have a pet subject. Wherever I get a group of educators, I do not lose the moment, and I will become monotonous. But I don't mind because I believe in this. We in Botswana believe that teaching has to be an essential service, just as essential as nursing is. Just as much as a doctor shouldn't leave a patient on the operation table to go on strike, a teacher should never walk out of a child in class because they must go on strike. This is what we believe very, very strongly, and I try to encourage my colleagues in all the other governments that we have to work in this direction, because if it's Botswana alone, the ILO doesn't listen. And I'm happy that UNESCO is here. This is my plea to UNESCO. I've said it before. ILO is another arm of the United Nations, and we cannot allow one arm that protects one interest to totally compromise the interests of a harmless group of children who are dependent on us as adults. For the sponsors, all I do is congratulate you, and I'm sure Oracle will be happy to know that Botswana is on the Oracle platform. When I was at communications, I made sure I hadn't met them. Now at least I see where they are. And that says you cannot have IT islands within your system as a government or within your country as a state or within your countries, so that South Africa can only talk to South Africa, or Western Cape can only talk within Western Cape but cannot talk to KwaZulu-Natal. And this, please, we would then ask for sponsors and producers of these things to at least have that moral obligation to always, always say, but you cannot use this if you have that, because these two will not talk to each other. This will save governments a lot of money in revamping. It will save a lot of money, but above all, it will facilitate quicker flow of information and therefore quicker learning, because the systems have to be seamless if we can get to that. And then the last request, again, to sponsors and producers of the things, the systems we consume. We often have to depend on your agents for backup, for service, for parts. And not always are your agents fully equipped, fully trained, fully qualified. I hope for a moment when you yourselves will have our own people, government officials, trained and equipped to know what to do if the system crashes. So we don't wait for some, because again, this is also a question about confidentiality. There are words in English I never dare use because I can't pronounce them. The level of confidentiality, yes, in the material. And if you're going to be inviting all sorts of people to walk into your system, you don't know what else comes in. So the security of the systems become compromised because you don't have the capability as a user in-house to fix and repair. That's just by way of request. I like giving instructions, and let me, before I run out of my welcome time and hospitality, cut it right there, and thank you very, very much.